Welcome to my third Vantage Point video garage chat. The main topic of this one will be a recent trip my wife and I took from Ireland to Germany, driving across the UK using this 35-year-old Mobility Kadett Mobi. There's a few things that I picked up before the trip. One of them is the 2020 catalogue from my sponsors, EFOX Engineers, and in this you can see the Jefferson tools that I frequently use here in the garage. You can pick that up from their trade counter at Baldonnel Business Park in Dublin, or you can see it online at efox.ie. I also got this from my other sponsor, mixgarage.com, and it's an EU driving essentials pack, which includes a first aid kit, a warning triangle and a vest. I also picked up from them before another trip these alcohol-proof breathalyzers, a pair of those, which have been in the back of the car since the last time. This was going to be Mobi's first big trip of the year, apart from a few little trips running around locally, and it's still within the mileage of the last service that I did, and I made a little video of that if you want to check it out. But there's still a few little improvements I wanted to do to ensure a good driving experience on such a long trip. One of the things that was very irritating when you did a longer journey was that the temporary setup I'd made with the exhaust when I first got it didn't quite clear the bodywork very well at the sill. So once it got bumped underneath on a speed bump or on a compression in the road, it would rattle frequently after that against the bodywork and was very irritating. So I've made a video of making up a new section where I had a silencer that was an ideal shape that came with some pipes for something else, and I'm really pleased with the setup I got from that. I've not been completely happy with the way that Mobi has been running. There's a little bit of a hesitance when accelerating, and the idle isn't perfect even when completely warm. So I was interested to see that the engine I got with Erik, a 1.3 overhead cam, had a Solex carburetor fitted to it, which looks original, so it's probably the right one for it. And the Solex carburetors I've been using on both Gina actually and Mobi were both originally from 1.2s, so the jetting on this one from Erik might be better. So I fitted that just before the trip, and the result was really great. The car was much more responsive and cruised much more smoothly when we got out on the road. As I would be passing Cork Engine Centre on the way from where I live in the southwest of Ireland up to Dublin, I took the opportunity to carry Erik's engine with us. That's the one that was given some very terminal sounds, and I was warned about that before it was given to me. So the lads are going to strip that down and see if it can be made up without any issues, and I'll have something then as a run around in Erik before his rally preparations. It's always a mad dash for us to the ferry up in Dublin, and this was no different. And it was really lucky I'd done the job on the exhaust, because we would have had to go so much slower on the bumpy road with the way the old exhaust was hanging. So it made a great benefit to the trip right at the beginning. So we just dropped that off with the lads and got back out on the motorway. And again, the carburetor work really paid off. We had a lovely cruise up to Dublin, just below the speed limit all the way, and we just had about half an hour spare when we checked in. My exhaust welding work was really tested then when we were driving up the bumpy ramp onto the ferry. This will test my welding. Sweet spot. We disembarked at Hollyhead in the early evening, and my wife did the first shift across the top of Wales, driving in pretty heavy rain conditions and in the dark. It wasn't an ideal night to be on the road, as we were heading into a storm that would actually cover the whole country over the weekend. But we did get off the road before midnight at our friend's house, and we had a lovely weekend hanging out with them. We were staying with my friend Des and his wife. You might remember Des. He's my best man from my wedding, and he was one of the guys on the trip that we took to Berlin with Gina. After a quick trip to a local Vauxhall dealer and a photo opportunity for Mobi with his English cousins, and a quick inquiry about the e-Corsa, which unfortunately they didn't have yet, we made our way on down to London from Northampton, where we'd been staying. And it was quite a steady run because there was a lot of roadworks along the way, so we were mostly in fifth gear going along at 80k. But it was a relaxing morning, and after the storm it was actually a nice dry day, and the approach into London was actually, it was very exciting to see the tall buildings looming up in the distance. We were on our way to stay with my uncle that I originally restored Mobi for. He's backed this whole project since the very beginning, and this is going to be a second opportunity for him to have a spin around in the car, and hopefully the extra deck of windows would provide a decent view of London's high-rise skyline. On our first full day in the city, we met up with some other friends, and one of them treated us to a visit to the V&A Museum, where there was a very interesting, for me, exhibition about cars and their social impact over their 100-year plus history. And thanks, Maria, for this great book, which actually details all of the exhibits, and there's a kind of a lot more backstory to the whole exhibition. It's a fascinating read, so thanks again for that. We also met up with an old school friend of mine who lives in London now, AJ, and it was fascinating to catch up with him and to hear about the musical that he's actually creating at the moment called Unicorn. And you can check that out on his Facebook page, Unicorn New Musical. Our second day in the city was the opportunity for the trip with my uncle. So I got down to the car nice and early in the morning and checked all the fluids and everything, and then as we were closer to the time to head off, I had it all nicely warmed up. So we shot a bit of video of using the hydraulic rear suspension to lower the car and to drop the ramp, and also belting his chair into the back of the car. And once we were all loaded up and ready to go, I sat in, turned the key, and the battery had gone flat. So the knock-on effect of having the carburetor improvement was that the car was running so slow. It's after highlighting that the alternator isn't giving enough charge at low RPM to refresh the battery. Especially after using the extra power to use the lift to pump the hydraulics, and unfortunately the system is wired. Might be something I'll do a workaround on. It's wired in such a way that you can't run the car while you run the lift. So anyway, luckily his car, there was a space beside us, so we were able to use his daily driver, put that in beside us, and jump started Mobi from that, and we were able to carry on with our trip. We drove a little bit around the area where he lives and down to Greenwich, where there's a fantastic viewing point at the observatory. But unfortunately when we went to start again, it was still too low, so we took a jump start off an obliging local, and sometimes you just have to swallow your pride when using vintage cars. But that got us going again, and we continued our run around the city and back to his place. And then later that evening we took his car to go into the city and saw a performance of Beethoven's Ninth in the Barbican. And that's why we chose that music for the video, which I've already uploaded, and you can see of our little trip around London and the more detailed video of using Mobi's mobility access. Packed up again for the spin down to the Dover ferry. We left really early in the morning, and actually on that occasion Mobi started by himself. We left really early though, in case we did have any problems, And when we got to Dover, we went to a large motor factors and debated about buying an expensive battery, but Mobi was restarting by himself in the car park, so decided to take a chance on it and that we might pick up a cheap one in France. But I did manage to find this cheeky little souvenir, which will no doubt become a collector's item in time. When we were there, we got a message from the ferry company, a text, to say that our ferry was delayed, but we decided to get on up there early anyway, and as luck would have it, they were able to actually book us onto the earlier ferry that was delayed, so we actually departed earlier than originally planned, which was going to be great because we had over 450 kilometers to do on the other side, driving into the evening across the top of France, through Belgium, and in a bit to Germany, to near Bonn, where Sarah's parents live. It was actually my first time to see the cliffs of Dover. At the other side, we disembarked in Calais, and we pretty soon went to a French supermarket and did decide to buy the biggest battery we could fit in Mobi, and which was actually at very good value. And this gave us a bit of security as we headed on into the night with, again, rain and the headlights on and the wipers going full blast and the heater running too. We did want to make the most of whatever electricity we could get out of the weak alternator. While we were in Germany, we took one day trip with Mobi to the city of his last owner. We had visited Wuppertal last year when we were over, but the famous Schwebebahn railway, which is an electric hanging railway that goes right through the whole city, it was closed last year, so we weren't able to see it. So we parked up Mobi with a bunch of other Opels, actually, funnily enough, and we actually did the whole route of the railway, which was established in 1901. It's absolutely a brilliant experience. Later in the afternoon, we went to visit Thorsten, Mobi's last owner, in his new house, where he's building a old converted Kadett pickup truck into his basement. And because there's a few parts that I still need from Erik that I realised when I did the trial fit, I'm missing the mounting for the brake booster. Thorsten's going to cut this pickup truck in half. It's no longer a viable car, and he's going to make it into a bar. So I know he doesn't need the parts from the left hand side. So after a bit of carcheology in the basement, I managed to get the bits and pieces that I wanted. And we had a great chat then, and we were discussing would he bring his Kadett Aero over to Ireland sometime and visit us. We stayed on in Germany for a couple of local Carnival events in the area that my wife is from, and this inevitably happened. I always knew when I got married to Sarah that eventually someday I'd end up dressed up in lederhosen. Our return trip was to be an over 800 km journey down through Belgium and the top of France to Cherbourg, where we were going to get a direct ferry back to Dublin. We decided to break this trip as close to halfway as we could, and we booked into a lovely manor house near the town of Treport. We arrived at the old tourist town after dark, but you could see that it was a really, really scenic place. Even at night time, all the restaurants along the harbour front were lit up, and it was really beautiful. We parked up in front of the fish market and walked around the area and saw all the old Norman buildings, and discovered that they have a vernacular railway that goes up through the cliffs, and there's actually a chateau on the top that you can visit. So this is somewhere we definitely want to go back in the summertime. It's an ideal place for us to break this journey when we go from Cherbourg to Bonn. So we'll definitely be back there. We had a lovely breakfast in the manor in the morning. The elderly couple that run it, they're full of the history of the area, and it's actually got a lot of ties with Ireland, so they told us all about that. So it was really nice to actually interact with France a little bit rather than just to drive through. The next day then we made a fantastic journey down to Cherbourg. We stayed off the main roads all the way, so we were driving through all these really scenic French towns, and spotted this really cool restoration place on the way, which was full of Renault 4s and 2CVs. Again, that might be somewhere we might call into, and I'd love to chat to the owners there. I've had a look at some stuff on the web, and it looks like a very busy operation. We made it to the ferry on time, and it was a relatively uneventful trip back. We had a nice cabin, and it was a good chance to rest after 2 full days on the road. When we disembarked then in Ireland, Mobi restarted fine, and but after cruising through the city, when we refueled to make our long motorway journey, and then which is followed by country roads at the end, Mobi didn't restart there. But I had the battery that we'd taken out fully charged up, so I was able to give it a quick jump, and we made it home. So look, despite those like little things, look, a battery problem can happen to any car. Other than that, Mobi went fantastically throughout the whole trip, and I'm really proud of this 36-year-old car. We really enjoyed it, and it's good to be home now, and I think it deserves a really good service. So I have an alternator ordered and a few other service parts. After that now it's due another oil and filter change. So we'll look after that now while we have Mobi in the garage.